The 737th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
Elton ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores. 17 seconds left. And he was fouled. Here we go. Lawson with a runner. No. The rebound. Hansbrough at the gun. Got it.
They were 4 for 24.
Hansbrough on a switch on Paulus. A deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Tipped away by Johnson. It's loose. Page. Johnson.
They're dancing in the aisles. They're high-fiving. They're celebrating. They're going bananas on Franklin Street.
Pass to Britt, 15 seconds to play. Up high to Page, gets a screen from Meeks. Page driving in on the left, high off the glass for 2. 6 seconds to go. Pinson comes front court. Pinson to May for the win. Got it! Luke May! He got it! 0.3 of a second! Luke May gives Carolina the 75-73 lead. Are you kidding? Into Dixon. Boozer switches onto him. Dixon the kick. Trimble! Got it! And Carolina wins
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony here with you guys on a Tuesday night, here to talk a little Carolina basketball. Sayon Keita, or Keita, depending on how you pronounce it, is officially in Chapel Hill. We will talk about that. And Michael Malone joined Jon Rothstein on the Inside College Basketball Now podcast to talk about the state of his program 4.5 months after he was hired back in April. It's the first time we've heard from the head coach of Carolina basketball since his introductory press conference. He has not held a summer press conference to this point. And so listened to that, dug up all the audio, all the sound bites of what Michael Malone had to say. We'll play it for you guys and react to it here on tonight's edition of the show. Do want to address, if you're watching us on video, we're live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can hear me. You cannot see me. That was done to save your eyes. If you cannot hear it in my voice, kind of under the weather. Got a little bit of sinuses going on, sneezing, coughing, left and right. Figured y'all did not want to see that, so y'all get the night off from seeing my ugly mug. But we do have Anthony here with us tonight on camera, so enjoy looking at his face for the next 45 minutes or so. With that, let's go ahead and get right into this edition of the podcast. We start every edition of the pod, as we always do, with the pod thought of the day. I actually forgot to lay that out. So poor job by your host here. I'm trying to pull it up here really quickly to see what we have. We go to Mark Cuban. There we go. It's right here at the top of the list where I pull these from. Work like there is someone working 24 hours a day to take it away from you, end quote. I like to think that I work 24 hours a day. Sometimes I feel like I work 24 hours a day. I most certainly look it with the bags under my eyes. But this is something that we'll talk about here and really in just a moment. that Michael Malone, I think, has really brought to the Carolina basketball program. There's just a different work ethic I think he's brought to the job. And I don't want to say that that's because Hubert Davis was not working 24/7, 365. I just think there's a different mindset in Chapel Hill with Michael Malone, and we'll get to that when we get to some of this audio here in just a moment. But with that, let's go ahead and get right into the first order of business, and that's Sayon Keita making his way to Chapel Hill. It was reported and confirmed on Saturday, first by the fine folks over at Inside Carolina, that his visa had been accepted, cleared, and the Mali native was going to make his way stateside. We saw the photo late Saturday night of him, at RDU, where Michael Malone and some members of the Carolina contingent were there to pick him up and transport him back to Chapel Hill. We saw the photo of him on Sunday, getting integrated into town life, eating at Sutton's there on Franklin Street. Don't know what he was eating. Could not see the photo of the food. I would like to think they gave him some good old-fashioned chicken and waffles. That's usually my go-to when eating there on Franklin Street at Sutton's. And also, by the way, we got to put some weight on this kid to really get his body ready to go. But the classes started on Monday, and the longer that this process drew out, where he just wasn't even stateside, that was going to just grow the worries and concerns about whether or not Carolina would have him ready to go for this season. And he still has yet to be cleared by the NCAA, along with Greece's Alexandros Samodurov. So there's still another hurdle to climb. But Saturday, this weekend, was a step in the right direction for this basketball program, having a member of the front court in Sayon Keita, who has, the highest upside of any member of the front court, which was rebuilt, revamped after losing both Caleb Wilson and Henry Vassar to the NBA draft.
Yeah, you needed some sort of positivity on this front. I'm not going to say we were panicking, but it was starting to become a little bit concerning because we had heard, it doesn't seem like it's that big of a hurdle to clear. He's going to he's going to be in the United States shortly. We heard that like a month ago. And so for the longest time, we're sitting there like, okay, this probably isn't great that it's taken that much longer. And you're getting into August. It's, right around the corner, this team getting on the court and actually starting to prepare for the season. So you needed to get step one done because we're going to see how long does it take the NCAA to clear both of these guys. No idea, because right now the NCAA's focus is on the 5-and-5 guys and trying to get that either overturned or, they have to make the decision that they're going to say, no, we're going to let this stand and we're going to let these guys play. I think that's where a lot of their focus is. So hopefully, there is a chance for these guys to get cleared here shortly. We don't have to go all the way up until the start of the season like we did last year with Luka Bogovac, but at this point, I don't know if I'm necessarily holding my breath, but you've gotten over the first hurdle. So it's a little bit of a sigh of relief. Now you've got him here and you've got a chance to at least start getting these guys some practice on the court. I think based on what we saw last year with Luka Bogovac, these guys should be able to practice with Carolina. Now, it will probably be similar. If they're not cleared by the time that Carolina plays their exhibition against USC, then they won't play. The same thing when they play their exhibition later on in the preseason against Indiana. If they're not cleared then, they probably won't play. But you want to at least get these guys working around their teammates, building some relationships, building some chemistry, and starting to understand exactly what Michael Malone is looking for from an offensive standpoint, from a defensive standpoint, from an effort standpoint. All of those things now are in motion with both of these guys here in the United States. So that was my first thought about it. I was, pretty elated that we got that news and that it has officially that he has officially been allowed into the U.S. And now it's just about clearing that next hurdle. It sucks, but this is the way that Carolina has chose to build this roster, is by going and getting overseas guys. And these are some of the things that you're going to have to deal with when you go and get guys, especially that are older. It seems like that's what leads to a lot of the, questions about whether or not they're going to be eligible, figuring out how many years of eligibility each guy has. So that's what they're probably working through on the back end right now.
Yeah, I'd like to think there would be a much more clean way to expedite this process. This is the NCAA. It's always going to be a pain in the butt. We're going to go, we're going to go around our elbow to get to our belly button to try to get where we're trying to get to. And that's unfortunate because, we can sit here and we can gripe and complain and we can worry as fans, podcast hosts, whatever. And okay, we're as people that pay, that are funding the sports, I think you have a right to that. It's ultimately unfair to the kid, the player involved that committed back in April. Back in April. It was the end of April when he committed to Michael Malone in Carolina. But you're talking all of May, all of June, all of July, where his status of trying to get him here was in limbo. And, it finally did get resolved, but it should not take almost 4 months. And part of this is, we're not going to get political. We know how difficult it is for people to get into this country now with some of the restrictions put in place by the current administration. I don't think it should be that difficult for an athlete. That's just, going to come here. Yes, he's going to enroll in classes, get, some forms, some level of an education, but play basketball more than likely for just a year, and then enter his name into the NBA draft where he'll want to play professionally. But regardless, he's here. And now, the main focus, the main goal for Malone and this staff is to have these guys cleared in a manner that when you take the court for fall practice, and I hate to already be projecting towards that, we're 6 weeks away from this team taking the court for an official practice in the preseason. You can do so with the intent of knowing, hey, these guys are practicing to play. Unlike with Luka Bogovic, who was practicing, wasn't known when he was going to play. Of course, we all remember we found out about 6:30 the opening night before a 7 o'clock tip that he was ready to go. You're not going to tell me that did not impact him, at least from a mental perspective, as he was making the adjustment, being, away from home and trying to get acclimated to not only playing college basketball, but playing college basketball at a place like Carolina, where every time you walk on the court, there's an expectation that you play a certain way. And that's something that Keita and Sam Maduro will have to adjust to. We know how passionate those fan bases are overseas. I don't know if they've played in as pressure-packed an environment as what they'll play in at Carolina, where the expectation is for them to compete and perform at a high level. One, because now we're paying you to do so, but two, when you put on that jersey demands a level of excellence that, quite frankly, those overseas clubs can't compare to what, Carolina basketball's lineage is like. I did want to ask you this before we get into the Michael Malone audio. With Keita here, and I think optimism as high as it's been all offseason that he'll be cleared to play when Carolina is in exhibition season. And remember, they play USC in Greensboro. They play Indiana and Indianapolis. Those two teams will be preseason top 25 teams. So those are really good competitions for Carolina in the preseason. But when they take the court for their first regular season game to open the Michael Malone era, do you think that Kada will be a starter now that he's here and the path is a lot more clear to him. Is a lot more clear for him being cleared to be eligible to play per the NCAA.
Yeah, I mean, if he's eligible, I think he's probably the guy. What would I prefer? I would probably prefer Samodurov because he's a little bit more experienced. I think he's probably going to be able to be a little bit more physical than Kada. But either way, I don't think you feel bad with either one of those guys in there because the raw talent is there. I think where you become concerned is if neither guy gets cleared and then Cameron Fens is the guy that has to start the opener. And it's no offense to Cameron Fens. I don't think it's his fault, but I think that's putting a lot on the plate of a guy that came from the Summit League last year. That's a lot to ask for him. Hey, we need you to come in to one of the most pressure-packed schools in the country, and we need you to be a starter, not only at a power conference school, but at a place like North Carolina. So that's where I think it's really, really important for Carolina to get those guys cleared and get them out there on the court. Now, I mean, I say that like Carolina can do anything about it. They can't, but it's just you're hoping that sooner rather than later, those guys are cleared to play and that you'll have those guys ready. And the good news is let's say there is a scenario where those guys don't get cleared right up until game time, like Luka Bogovac did last year. You are starting with Western Carolina. So that's a much easier team to start with than, let's say, if you were opening the season at Kentucky or even at home. You know, let's say last year's second game of the season was the first game. Kansas at home. That would be a lot to ask, and you would say, yeah, I could see why people are probably a little bit down on Carolina's chances to win the game. So, you know, I just hope that you're right, that this is an expedited process, that we can find a way for this to get approved here in the next handful of weeks, preferably within the next couple. And then you know that, hey, we're going to have these guys. There'll be a full go in practice. There'll be a full go in those exhibitions. I think that's what you're hoping for. Like, at the least, let's make sure that they're cleared for those exhibitions. That would be very helpful to have those guys out there going through those important reps and getting a feel for what exactly your rotation is going to be like at that center position this year. Because if not, and let's say they do get cleared before the start of the season, again, it's going to be like last year where you went through all these different scenarios in the exhibitions where you didn't have Luka Bogovac. And now on the night of the first game, now we got to figure out how to work him into the game. Because you're not going to just not play Kada and Samodurov if they get cleared. They're too talented. So I would rather do that against USC and Indiana. If I had to say right now what I think happens, I think it's probably very similar to last year. I think the guys will get cleared, but it'll be very close to that season opener, if not the actual night of the season opener.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you right now, if we get to the opener, and it looks like our front court at the when we do the preview, right, and we usually do preview 48 hours before, is Cameron Fens and Cade Bennerman. I will grow my hair back out, and I will pull it out of my head live on the podcast, because the stress would be at an all-time high in November if we are enduring that. And I know that comes across very disrespectful to Fens and Bennerman, and I don't mean it that way. It's no offense to those two dudes, but there's a reason why Carolina went overseas to get these two guys. And I believe in their upside. I like what I think Malone is capable of doing with these two dudes. And so the sooner that I know they're going to be wearing that uniform and competing, the better that I'll feel, because I'm not going to lie to you. The stress is already starting to set in, the concern. I had a dream the other night that Carolina lost their season opener for whatever reason by 51 points. And it led to a bad night of sleep, because in my sleep I did the podcast, and it was not a very fun podcast. And I don't want that stuff projecting forward into the actual season. So I need the NCAA to get my guys cleared. Let's get these so these guys can not only practice with this team, but know they're going to be a part of this team for the entirety of the year. Because I do think the more that they play, the better that they'll be. We're going to watch these two guys, even though they're professional overseas players. We're going to watch these two guys grow up. We're going to watch these guys develop. And it's going to be, I think their individual growth collectively will determine the ultimate ceiling for this team that is going to be very backcourt dependent. You've got to have both. And so I feel better knowing that they're both here. Now let's just get them cleared, because we need both of these guys to be able to perform on a night in, night out basis for Michael Malone. Speaking of Double M, he joined Jon Rothstein, maybe the only other guy that loves college basketball more than me, on the Inside College Basketball podcast, to talk about his offseason. And, Rothstein, first off, does a great job covering, promoting the sport during a time of year where even myself, gearing up for football season, I'm ready to watch some daggum football. But, college basketball is right around the corner. And this is the first time we have heard Michael Malone speak publicly since his introductory press conference, which we were a part of all the way back that April, or that Tuesday in April. He has not publicly spoken since. There's not been a summer press conference, mainly because his roster has not been finalized as of till about 2 weeks ago. I would imagine we'll hear from him before fall practice does officially begin. But with that, we've got some audio that we're going to comb through. We've got 8 sound bites that we're going to play for you guys. Some of them are a little bit lengthy, but we got the video so you can look at the head coach while he's speaking. You can analyze Jon Rothstein's hair. Very bad hair day for him on his podcast. Some of this stuff will be repetitive, and this will be stuff you've heard Michael Malone talk about before, but if you haven't, this will be new for some of you guys as well. We'll start here with him talking about why he ultimately accepted the job after turning down then AD Bubba Cunningham and new AD Steve Newmark 3 times.
You turned the job down three times. Why didn't you turn it down a 4th and ultimately decide to take the job at North Carolina?
Well, what do they say in the mob, right? They made me an offer I couldn't refuse. Steve Newmark, our athletic director, Eric Coots, our director of basketball operations, they came to my house from the Final Four on Easter Sunday. I had been speaking to them for a couple of weeks, and each time I talked to them and I learned a little bit more about the school, I didn't come here because my daughter plays volleyball here. I've never been afraid of a challenge. Mm-hmm. And I grew up a Carolina fan. My father was a huge Dean Smith fan. And obviously, if my father loved Dean Smith, I was going to love Dean Smith. And so that was something that was taught to me at an early age. And when this job came open, and the more I thought about it, I could stay the course and try to become an NBA coach once again. We had tremendous success in Denver. We won a world championship in 2023. And I did not like how my tenure in Denver ended. I wanted to kind of get back. But what really kind of made the decision easier for me as I thought about it was I love and embrace the challenge. And North Carolina basketball presented an opportunity that very few people even have a chance to consider. And I did not want to have any regrets. Years down the road, I did not want to look back and say, I turned down an opportunity to coach one of the most prestigious basketball programs in the country. And so I embraced that challenge. I put a great staff of people around me. We're bringing in players for this season's team. We're off to a great start with our recruiting for next year and the year after. And I have attacked this. I didn't come here to hang out. People say, Coach, do you golf? I don't golf, John. I work. I've been in the gym. We've been working hard trying to get this program back to where all of Tar Heel Nation wants it to be.
Say what you want about Michael Malone, and I don't think he's completely won the fan base over. ultimately the only way he'll do that is by winning on the basketball court. He understands the reverence this job carries, demands, and what the expectations are. And I can appreciate that. And to his credit, we've got a football coach that was trying to make the adjustment from, a successful career at the NFL level to the collegiate level. Michael Malone, a very successful coach in the NBA. There hasn't been the circus around his program. There hasn't been something that's been done that's been puzzling, that's even been questioned. Even retaining, guys like Sean May and Pat Sullivan. When you find out how integral those guys were to getting the transfer portal ready to go, it made sense why he kept those guys maybe in favor of a Jeff Lebo or a Brad Frederick, a guy that I was a really big fan of during his time as an assistant on the Carolina bench. So I say all this to say, I think he has embraced Carolina the way you would want a outsider to embrace our program. I think, he looks very natural wearing the Carolina colors, whether it's a polo, jumpsuit, the shoes, no matter what it is. And I think he has done a really good job integrating himself into the fabric of our program on and off the court. And we know how important that is to the fans.
Yeah. And the most important thing that I think he understands, he said it there right at the end, or the goal is to get back to winning the way that Carolina wants to win. That's the ultimate thing that matters. That's the reason you made this move. That's the reason that not even the reason that you hired him. It's the reason that you fired a Carolina guy in Hubert Davis. So no matter who you picked as the next head coach, that was going to be the expectation. And it feels like he understands that. Now, the thing that you can debate is, what are his ultimate goals? Do you believe that he's a guy that wants to be here for the rest of his coaching career? I still couldn't tell you that. I still couldn't tell you that. Yes, he definitely does. I can't tell you that he doesn't. And I would say that when we went to the introductory press conference, I was leaning towards he probably doesn't. His ultimate goal is to get back to the NBA. Now I think it's probably 50-50, because I do think that he's going to get adjusted to this level. There's going to be, it seems like there's already starting to be a love for coaching at this level. And I think it might be something that just grabs him. And if he can succeed the way that we're hoping that he's going to succeed, which is bringing Carolina back to the level that we think they should be at every single year, then yeah, he's going to be a guy that's going to be here for a while. I would think Carolina is going to make it worth his while. And part of it is that, yeah, he said it at the start. They made an offer that I couldn't refuse. Part of that is probably the money, but the other thing is that I don't think he was turning the job down because there wasn't enough money there. I think he was a guy that probably just needed a little bit of convincing, because it is a little bit of a risk. And sometimes even someone that presents the type of front that you see from Michael Malone, yeah, I mean, not a front, but what you see, I mean, he's seen as a pretty tough guy. Sometimes guys are afraid of change. And I think that might have been a little bit of what it was for Michael Malone, maybe a little bit of doubt on his part that he would be able to succeed at this level. But I think he's overcome that. I think he was convinced by, Steve Newmark and Eric Hoots and some of those other guys that talked to him, including Roy Williams, that, yeah, this is something that you can do, and you can do it at a high level here at Carolina. And so, I feel pretty confident going into this year. I can't say that I'm 100% confident that this is going to work. Like, I'm not saying that Carolina is going to the Final Four this year. I'm not even saying they're getting to the Sweet 16 this year. But what I do think is that everything that he's done so far, as you said, for the most part, we have been on the same page with him. For me, I don't really look at a move and say, I really don't like that. Of course, do I wish that there would have been the knowledge that the 5-for-5 rule was going to come down? Yes. But the thing is that look at all the other coaches that filled their roster before all of this ended up happening. There are some schools that couldn't fill their roster, and that's why they have these open spots, and that's why they're landing a lot of these guys. For Carolina, that we knew that one thing that they didn't really want to do when it came to a lot of these guys was wait around. We saw it when it came to the Drew Karras side of things. They said, nope, you're going to take your time deciding on this. Well, we're going to go with Matt Abel. They did the same thing with Cameron Fens. There were, they could have said, oh, you know what? We're going to stay in the battle for Duke Brennan. We're going to stay in the battle for Micah Hanlogden, and we're going to see how this ultimately works out. In the end, they said, no, we're going to go with the guy that wants to be here now, that we feel we can get here as soon as possible, and that we feel like will be able to mesh in with these guys a lot easier because he's going to be on campus earlier. So, I think that would be the only thing that we've heard people criticize this staff for and criticize Michael Malone for. But again, we said this when we talked about Seth Trimble. I don't even really know how you can criticize him on that front. So it feels like he's making all the right moves. Now we'll just have to see if it translates onto the court in the way that we ultimately wanted to for Carolina, which is getting back to the high standards that we have for this program.
The second piece of sound we'll bring to you guys, obviously, he was the first hire since Frank McGuire to be a non-Carolina family member, no ties to the university, something that, when we talked about the job, whenever it came back open when Roy Williams retired and then when Hubert Davis got fired, was how much would the Carolina family have a say in the hiring process? He was asked about how he's trying to bridge the gap as a non-family member.
You're the first coach since Frank McGuire to be hired at North Carolina with no previous ties to the school. How does Michael Malone bridge that gap with the North Carolina family?
Well, you talk about Frank McGuire, a nice, good Irishman from New York City. Mike Malone, another Irishman from New York City. And the way I'm going to bridge that gap, and I think when I put together my staff, John, I did it with intent and purpose. And so keeping a guy like Sean May, who played here, was a lottery pick, won a national championship on my staff. Pat Sullivan played for the late, great Dean Smith, won a championship in 1993, a part of my coaching staff. I hired Deion Thompson and Brandon Robinson, both players that played here, but not only played here, they, like Pat Sullivan and Sean May, also won national championships here. A guy like Eric Hoots has been here for 20 plus years. So I found a way to keep that connection with the past and the tradition of excellence and winning, while also hiring guys like Chuck Martin, a dear, close friend of mine for the last 30 years, to come in and be my associate head coach, to bring in a guy like Brian Tabaldi from Providence College, who has NBA experience as well, and Jorge Sands, who I just hired, who was working for Hall of Fame coach Mark Few at Gonzaga, and Jorge brings an international background, being from Spain originally. So I feel we've done a really good job as I put together this staff, connecting to the past, but bringing in some new ideas and people from the outside as well.
All right, now let's go back-to-back cuts here. This may be outside of when he talked about how he wants to recruit and build his roster, was the answer that got my attention the most. And that was, he was asked about his relationship with former head coach Roy Williams.
What is the Michael Malone, Roy Williams relationship like as you make this transition to Chapel Hill?
Well, Coach Williams had a lot to do with me taking this job. I like this. I turned the job down 3 times. Wow. And I felt finally at peace about that. And I was going to stay in the NBA and continue my NBA journey. And I had a couple of great conversations with Hall of Famer Coach Roy Williams. And I had just met him. I just got to know him, but I feel like I've known him for years. Coach Williams has that kind of impact on you. And the thing that really resonated with me, John, is this: how much Coach Williams loves this university, how much Coach Williams loves this program, and that passion that he has. He has been unbelievably welcoming to me and my family, and he's been around. I told him it's really important for me to have Roy Williams to be a part of this program because I know how much it means. So I told him he can sit in my seat some nights if he wants to, and I'll go sit in the stands. But he said he doesn't want to do that anymore. But Coach Williams is the best. He and his wife, Wanda, are just unbelievable people, and they care about one thing. They care about this university and this program.
You turn.
I would give a lot of things to have one more game with Roy Williams on the bench coaching Carolina basketball. There's two things I want to tackle with this. One, the easiest way to win me over is love Roy Williams and revere Roy Williams the same way that I do. If you know us, you know that we are Roy Williams disciples. Outside of my father, there's not been a more influential male in my life than Roy Williams. I've read his book. I've listened to every press conference he ever held. His words are they're equivalent to when you read the Bible and you see Jesus' words written in red. They're written in Carolina blue. They have that kind of impact on me. And the fact that Michael Malone can talk about Roy Williams in that way makes me a whole heck of a lot easier to want to root for him outside of just the fact that he's the head coach of my favorite team. The embracing of Roy Williams, and hear me out on this, I always felt like it wasn't 100% there with Hubert. And I know that Roy Williams was there. I know that Roy Williams was present. He was a season ticket holder. As a media member, when I get into my seat, the first thing I look for is to see when he is there. It's just something that I do because I care about his presence that much. And I know that Roy Williams traveled. But it didn't seem like to me that Hubert Davis wanted him as involved as, and maybe Roy Williams doesn't want to be involved and didn't want to be involved. I always felt like for me, when things got tough, there would not be a better sounding board for Hubert Davis than Roy Williams. But we see this summer, it feels like every other time the social media stuff for the Carolina basketball program is going up or they're doing family gatherings or reunions or whatever, there's Michael Malone and there's Roy Williams. He's been at practice. He's been there to meet the new players as he's brought them in from the portal, high school recruiting internationally. That's not lost on me. Because that's the godfather of the program. Like, you want to make me happy, please, Roy Williams, and I'll be happy. As long as that man's happy, I'm happy. And I think he understands the gravity of having that guy on your side in a way that probably John Shire knows the same thing with Duke and Coach K. Like, it's better for him to be on my side and me fully embrace him, as opposed to, hey, you can be around, but I don't want you around too much. And that was how I felt like it was with Hubert. I can't confirm it. I wasn't there to see it. But it never felt like to me that Hubert embraced Roy Williams' presence the way that it appears that Michael Malone has embraced Roy Williams' presence. And I know that I hope when they walk out of the tunnel, the first game of the year, that Roy Williams is there clapping. And I hope that when Michael Malone walks off the court after beating Duke, after beating State, winning an ACC title, taking the program to the Final Four, I hope that first person there to greet him is Roy Williams and Michael Malone know that he is there to support him as much as he is there to support Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it when the hire was made, that we were guys that were still in the camp of we want Roy Williams to maybe not make the decision, but at least sign off on the decision. We wanted him to be part of the group that was consulted about the decision. And, judging off of what we've heard from Michael Malone, that happened because clearly Roy had to be in talks with the people that were making this decision, like Steve Newmark, like some of the other people that were a part of the athletic department. Yeah, he was one of those guys that was given a chance to probably throw out some names. And I think Michael Malone was probably one that, maybe he didn't suggest it, but he probably said, yeah, that wouldn't be a bad name. Let me call him and let me talk to him. Especially after, the first few times of them offering the job to him, I bet you Roy said, let me give it a shot. Let me see if I can talk to him and possibly change his mind. And so, for us, that was a big deal, was that we needed Roy Williams to sign off on this. I know that people wanted to say that Roy is too old, that Roy doesn't understand the modern game. We shouldn't hear out what Roy has to say. Those people are idiots. And we will say that until the day that we die or, whatever. But, as long as Roy Williams is with us, Roy Williams should be consulted on these types of situations. There is nobody that is more of a Carolina man than Roy Williams. And so I think the fact, and we were wondering that when we went to the press conference with for Michael Malone, we were wondering, does he really, does he get it? I don't think that we were going in expecting that he's not going to get it, but we wanted to see it. We wanted to see a little bit of proof of that. And immediately he talked about Roy Williams and how important it is to carry on the tradition of this university. Now, to me, they were never going to pick somebody that didn't at least acknowledge the history and say that it's going to be a big part of what we talk about in that locker room. I think that's important. But I think with Michael Malone, he's really embraced it. And, part of it, I think, is also the fact that, yes, he has been on campus, the last handful of years. I think it's 2 years. I don't remember exactly how old and what class his daughter's in terms of eligibility. But he's been around campus, and I think he's gotten a feel for what's important to Carolina basketball fans, to Carolina basketball family, and that's Roy Williams. And so, yeah, you're always gonna have me in your corner if you're saying that someone that I revere, that I look up to, is Roy Williams, because that's exactly how I feel. And so, it feels like we talked about this, and he talked about it right there. He said, "Look, I'm here to blend the past with the present. I wanted to bring some guys on that have been with the program before. So you keep Sean May, you keep Pat Sullivan. They were on the previous coaching staff. They helped you bridge the gap, everything like that. But more importantly, those guys are Tar Heels. They know what it takes to be successful at this school, both as a coach and as a player. And then, you bring in Deion Thompson, who was on a national championship team. Brandon Robinson, albeit wasn't a massive part of that championship team, but was on a championship roster. And guys that feel very passionate about this university. You mix it with guys that may, I don't know how passionate they are originally, coming in about this university. They're going to get there, but they bring outside ideas. And this was what we talked about a lot with Hubert Davis. And I will say it whenever you bring up Hubert Davis and what was ultimately his undoing. This was part of it, man, that he wanted it to be all Carolina guys, and he never changed the staff. He didn't look for outside ideas. It was a good thought to begin, but especially going into last year, it would have been nice for him to say, hey, we got to bring in somebody that's going to give us, some outside ideas on things that we should be doing. You got Chuck Martin, you got Jorge Sanz, you got Brian Tabaldi, you got all of these guys that are going to be able to give you a different perspective from some successful programs, or, working in the NBA in the case of Tabaldi. I think that's really going to blend well with the Carolina guys that you got on the staff. But it feels like he gets the tradition of the program. He really does want that to be a part of what he preaches to these players, along with some new ideas. And I think that's what makes me feel confident that this can work.
In the interest of time, we'll skip soundbite number 4, jump right to soundbite number 5. A really interesting question and a really thoughtful answer here. Jon Rothstein asked him about him making the adjustment going from coaching NBA All-Stars, NBA Hall of Famers like Nikola Jokic, like Jamal Murray, to collegiate basketball players.
You mentioned that you won a world championship with the Denver Nuggets. You've been used to coaching the best players in the world, Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray. How much of a transition is it going to be to have an opportunity to coach great players, but maybe not the best players in the world like you had in the NBA?
Well, it was definitely a transition. And what I use the term, I've had to train my eyes. And so we went out the first weekend in Memphis for the EYBL. And Mishawaka, Indiana. And I'd never heard of Mishawaka, by the way, but I was in Mishawaka, Indiana. And I'm looking at these players and some of the highest rated players in the country. And Chuck Martin, my guy, he says, Coach, you got to remember, Jamal Murray's not here. Nikola Jokic isn't here. And you have to get used to that. These kids are 16, 17 years old. And once I was able to adjust my eyes and realize I have to take these players for who they are in this moment and evaluate them on that, while also having the ability to look forward, to look at the potential that they have and help them. That's the one advantage I think I have. So there's a lot of coaches that are going to talk to these recruits about, listen, I can help you get to the NBA. I know what it takes to get to the NBA. I know what it takes to be successful in the NBA. Well, guess what? I can do more than just talk about it. I've done that. I've walked that walk.
Yep.
I've been around 5 MVPs. I've been around 20 plus All-Stars in my many years in the NBA. We did win a championship in Denver, the first in franchise history. So those are things that I was a part of. It wasn't me. I was a part of something much bigger than myself. And as we recruit players to this program, we want to bring in guys that understand that are truly selfless in everything they do and understand that this is Carolina basketball. No one is bigger than the program here. The tradition of excellence, the players that played here, the list goes on and on. We all know about that. So I'm just excited about the challenge. I'm excited about the group of people I've surrounded myself with. And it's a lot of work. This is different than the NBA. There are no off days. You think you've got one thing done, one class is done, well, there's another class to get ready for and a class behind that. So we embrace it. We love it. And our goal is to get better every day. And I think we've done a really good job of that in the last 4 months.
I thought that was some honesty there that, hey, I've spent the last handful of years coaching the best of the best. And now I'm going to the level where I'm coaching where these guys want to become the best of the best. I've got to analyze them differently, coach them differently. Translation, I think he's got to be a lot more patient. And if you know anything about him during his time in Denver, this was a fiery guy. This was an emotional guy. He lives basketball. He wants to be in the gym. He wants to be be a part of a team that's putting in the work. And player development was a big part of Denver becoming that championship organization that they were back in 2023. It's not going to be the same at the collegiate level. And, I think he'll make that adjustment where you don't want your team to play the way that they're playing in November in March. Like we want to see gradual growth, gradual production, but it might not be the same, as it was at the NBA level. And so I just thought that was real open, real honest, and I really did enjoy that answer. We'll go back to back here with his next answer, which I thought was another something I was really interested to hear him kind of talk about publicly. He was asked about how he will navigate roster construction in the years to come, both through high school recruiting and the transfer portal.
As you build North Carolina's program, how will you balance building it through the transfer portal versus high school recruiting?
Yeah, great question. And listen, I'll say this. I'm an honest, direct person. I'm going to make mistakes. I was in college, as you mentioned, a long time ago, working at Providence College with Pete Gillen, the University of Virginia with Pete Gillen, and Manhattan College with Bobby Gonzalez. In the league, college basketball has changed a lot since then. Coming in right now, my whole mindset is this is North Carolina. We're going to get the best players in the country. We're not going to settle. We're not going to take a back seat to anybody. We're going to go out and get the best players. And if we feel we can get a high school player that can come in here and make an impact right away, we're going to get that player. That's my mindset. And then you also have, come the springtime after the season, now you have the transfer portal. I have one transfer portal, in me now, going through that, learning about it. And I think going into next year's portal, I'll have a hell of a lot more information. I'll be a lot more comfortable. But when you consider when I got the job, John, and the roster we were able to put together with getting a guy like Terrence Brown and Matt Abel and Neo Avdalas, to name a few, we feel that we did a hell of a job. And even getting guys late like Angelo Breezy, Cameron Fens, as well as some new young players, Maxie Adams, Sayon Keita, Kevin Thomas, with returning players. It's a real healthy mix. And so we'll balance it. I know some coaches say, I'm not going to do high school. I'm going all portal. Well, I wouldn't do that at Carolina because we have a special place and we feel we can get the best players in the country year in, year out. And that's what we plan to do.
All right. This is going to draw a long-worded comment from our guy, Kelvin Gainey, who is a faithful listener, and we thank him for that, but he loves to complain. If there's a difference from Hubert Davis to what you're from Michael Malone, there is a vision, and this is who we are, and this is how we're going to attack it, and we're not going to stop. It felt like with Hubert, we'll go get one of those players. We'll go get two of those players, depending on the recruiting class, depending on the transfer portal. I think with Michael Malone and the resources that are going to be made available to him, the goal is to go do what Kansas does, what Duke does, what Kentucky does, which is go get a lot of those players. And there is something to be said about, building a roster to have 4-year guys to have that continuity. But in my opinion, the best way to go about assembling your roster, if you think you have the right coach, is go get that coach as much talent as possible, because you're paying him $8.2 million to maximize talent, to get results on the basketball court. And yeah, there's other ways I think Carolina will be able to win games with some of the advanced analytics they're bringing into their program, with player development that they're bringing to their program. So the best way to win is have more talent than your opponent. And how many times has Carolina played against really good ACC programs or other power conference programs, excuse me, that had more talent than Carolina did 1 through 8, 1 through 9? It happened far too often for a school like Carolina. There should be schools that are on competitive levels, Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, Michigan, the schools I listed at the beginning, but there shouldn't be schools that have more talent than us in our own league and outside our own league. And it does appear that with the way that we talked about recruiting earlier this summer, they're involved with 6 of the top 10 recruits. The expectation is that they get at least 2 of them, at least, if not more. They did a really good job in the portal, bringing in highly sought-after transfers in those 3 guys he mentioned, Brown, Avdalas, Abel. I do believe that Carolina is positioned under Michael Malone to assemble talent in a way, quite frankly, they failed to do so under Hubert Davis.
It was one of the first things that we noticed about him was that there's just a different level of confidence with Michael Malone than there is with Hubert Davis. And look, he's coming in here as a proven coach at the NBA level. He's done it before. He took a team and won an NBA title. You look at what that team has been since he has left. Haven't been bad, but they haven't been anywhere near the team that went to the NBA Finals. So, I mean, I think that's just that is what is so different. And I hate it because, I mean, for some of us, we can relate to Hubert Davis. I don't know if Hubert Davis ever trusted himself that he was a good enough coach to win certain recruiting battles, maybe to even win certain games. but especially with recruiting, where what Michael Malone said there, we are not going to bow down to anybody when it comes to recruiting. It felt like whether it was on whether it was I don't know about on purpose, but whether he noticed it or not, it felt like that was kind of where Carolina was getting to, where they were taking a backseat to Duke, Kentucky, Kansas to a certain extent. These teams that were landing the top recruits. It just felt like under Hubert, and you saw it, a lot of it was from other fan bases, because for Carolina fans, it was hard to admit that your coach wasn't going to get these guys. But you would see a lot of fan bases across the country, a lot of these national fan bases that like to hate on Carolina, that would say Carolina just doesn't recruit on that level anymore. That's with Hubert Davis, they are not going to get those types of guys. And if they do, it's going to be one guy like a Caleb Wilson, like an Ian Jackson, like some of those guys. And most of them in recent memory aren't really going to develop when they're at Carolina. They're going to end up going to other schools, and we'll see what ends up happening there. Or they're just going to flame out at Carolina, and they're never really going to be exactly what we thought they were going to be. With Michael Malone, I would think it's going to be different. He is not going to roll over. Now, does it mean that he's going to miss out on certain prospects? Yes. Guys, schools like Duke, with the success that they've had, Kentucky, with how well they recruit the high school ranks, they're not just going to disappear. These schools are not going away. John Calipari at Arkansas isn't all of a sudden not going to recruit high school prospects, or you're just going to magically say, well, John Calipari, he's not where I want to go anymore. I definitely want to go to Michael Malone and Carolina. But I do feel like that's the one area where I feel much more confident today sitting here to say that, yes, Carolina is going to be better in that area. I think, the results on the court, still got to kind of wait and see. I'm buying in to a certain extent, but I'm not all in saying that, yes, this guy, will never have Carolina losing in the first round of the NCAA tournament in his time there. I'm not there yet. But yeah, recruiting, I feel like he's going to get Carolina back to a point where they need to be. And, he said, we're going to balance it. We're going to use the high school recruiting, but we're also going to use the transfer portal. I feel pretty good about what he's done in the transfer portal this time around. Now, we'll see how it blends together. We could come back in the middle of the season and say, yeah, this really wasn't a great roster build. But at this point, I feel pretty good in saying I don't think we're going to be doing that. I like Matt Abel a lot. I think he's got a chance to be a lottery pick for Carolina, to start a new streak, which of course began this year with Caleb Wilson getting selected in the lottery. I feel pretty good about Neo Abdallas. I said it when we talked about him a few times this offseason. I think he was a guy that had about as bad of a year as he was going to have with the talent that he had last year at Virginia Tech. I think you're going to see a better player this year at Carolina. I think they're going to utilize him a little bit better than Virginia Tech did last season. And then I like Terrence Brown. I don't know if he's an NBA prospect, but I think he's going to fit really well as a college scorer. And I think that's something that you're looking for. You're trying to win games at the college level at this point. It's not all about, finding guys that are going to be NBA superstars and just building a roster like that. First of all, a lot of those guys aren't in the transfer portal or aren't automatically in the transfer portal. But yeah, I think he's going to find that delicate balance, and I think he's going to be fine. How quickly he adjusts from the NBA level to realize that, yes, these are college kids, guys that are going to grow game to game, where in the NBA, guys don't really grow game to game. You're more likely to see that growth season to season. I think that's going to be interesting to see how he adjusts to that. You're not, you don't have a Nikola Jokic at least not yet. Jamal Murray, I don't think you have a guy that's on that level, but you never know. You could find that this season. I think it is going to be interesting to see how we adjust to that, but I really do think recruiting-wise and transfer portal-wise, you feel like you're in better hands.
All right, quickly, 2 more sound bites, then we'll get out of this edition of the podcast. Michael Malone the first one we'll play is his impressions early of his first roster he's put together in Chapel Hill.
What are your initial impressions of the roster that you're going to coach in 26-27?
Well, I'm excited. I think the greatest challenge, not only for me, but I imagine for every college head coach, is how do you build a team? There's only 5 returning players from my team last year, 3 scholarship players from last year's team. That's 11 new players. So in a short period of time, how do you as a coach help foster an environment where it's not about NIL money, it's not about how much is he making, how much am I making? Leave that at the door. If we want to win big, if we want to win at the highest level and be in Detroit for the Final Four, we have to find a way to build team. And as a coach, you can never spend enough time working on that, getting guys to buy into something much bigger than themselves. And that's a big part of the culture we're trying to create here, being selfless in everything that you do. And that's something that I have to make sure I am instilling and demanding from our players every single day. And that's something I think our players are fully aware. But I think the guys, we had our 8 weeks this summer. The guys that were here, I felt they bought in, they committed, they worked hard. Today is our first day of classes here, John, in Chapel Hill. We had some conditioning this morning. Guys are excited, and you can feel the energy. Obviously, I follow a tremendous lineage of Carolina coaches.
Yep.
And Hubert Davis, who was here before me, did an outstanding job as well. I'm just trying to build on that and add to that and make sure that we go out there this year and compete in a way that all of the Carolina fans, not just here in Chapel Hill, not just in North Carolina, but all the Carolina fans around the world, because we are a global brand.
Yep.
They can be happy and proud of the team they see performing every night on that court.
Lastly, he was asked about what are the list of accomplishments he has set out for his first season.
And that team is going to be showcased, as always, in an incredible schedule, not just the ACC, but you're going to play Arkansas in the ACC-SEC Challenge. You play Kentucky in the CBS Sports Classic. There's a game against Illinois in Nashville. There's a game against West Virginia. North Carolina is always going to be the focal point of college basketball when you talk about the best brands in the sport. But let's wrap on this, Michael. I know the goal is always to go as far as you can go in March and compete for a national championship. But for you, for Michael Malone, what are the biggest things that you want to accomplish in your first season as you now try to bring North Carolina back among college basketball's elite?
Yeah, well, this may sound corny, but it's something that I truly believe in. I told our players this the day I got the job. I reminded them last night at our team meeting. Goal number 1 is not to win a championship, because every team says that. If you're serious about that, your first goal is always going to be, we have to find a way to get better every day. Mm-hmm. And that might be in a conditioning, weight room, player development session. That might be in a practice and a shoot around, in a film session, whatever it may be. We have to find a way as a program to get a win every day and to get better. And if you do that, and that's going to be shown in your everyday actions. If you do that, then you'll have a chance come NCAA tournament time to be a team that can compete and maybe get to a Final Four. So that's number 1. Can we get better every day? The second thing is I want our guys to buy in to our style of play and our identity and how we want to play. And so, like I said, regardless of the result, I want our fans to walk out of the Dean Smith Center every night and say, you know what? They played hard. They played with toughness. They played together. Those are things that I think resonate with people. You can be proud of a team when they do those things. And, that's been my goal when I took over the Sacramento Kings as a head coach. That was my goal in year 1 when I took over the Denver Nuggets almost 12 years ago. And that's my goal this year going into year 1, sitting in that seat that Dean Smith sat in, that Roy Williams sat in, Bill Guthridge, and all the other coaches, Hubert Davis. That's something I do not take lightly. And we're committed to working as hard as we can, John, to go out there and have the best season possible while building team and being a team that all the fans could be proud of, both on and off the court.
He'll quickly learn that in at Carolina, it's hard, it's smart, it's together. That's the brand of basketball we want. That's the brand of basketball we expect. I thought that answer was very beautiful in the way that obviously we know what the expectation is. Like, I'm never going to lower my expectation for a program that's gone to 21 Final Fours and has won 6 NCAA tournament titles. I expect to have a Final Four caliber roster on a year in, year out basis. That's the expectation here. I don't think he's running away from that by saying our goal is not to win a national championship. Very coach speak in the way that you got to get better every single day. You got to win every single day. The back half of that answer was very important to me. Because if I thought there was one thing we lost, even the final handful of years of the Roy Williams era and to the 5 years of Hubert Davis's time, is how many times, even after they won, were we watching a team or watching a program that we didn't identify with the one that we grew up with? Like Carolina basketball, for me as a youngster, had a look for it. They were going to run the secondary break. They were going to score 90 points. They were going to offensive rebound, and they were going to do all these things. And it led to a bunch of wins. The final few years under Roy and the final and all of Hubert Davis's time, Carolina still won and still achieved at a level that a lot of programs would love to have that level of success. It didn't look the way that we want it to look at all times. It didn't look the way we expected it to look at all times. There would be times we would talk about wins, and I was still frustrated with how they won the game. And maybe that's a me thing, and I need to enjoy winning more, something I'm still trying to work on as I get ready to turn 30. But if they play hard, they play smart, they play together more often than not, I believe that they're going to win, and they're going to win in a way that's a lot more fun and exciting to watch as a fan, to talk about as a podcast host. I don't think we'll ever question Carolina's identity under Michael Malone. I think because he wears it on his sleeve. He's this generation's Frank McGuire. He's an Irishman from New York. He doesn't hide from that. He doesn't apologize from that. And I think we'll be able to see that with the way that his teams play. Where I don't think when Carolina gets beat, I'll have to question their competitive desire. They'll get beat because they shot 28% from three. They got beat because they didn't rebound the ball. Whereas how many times here recently when we've talked about losses, we talked about a team that was disengaged until the 10-minute mark in the second half. And that ultimately falls on your coach because it's their job at the collegiate level to have your guys ready to play, ready to compete. And I think I'm excited for that. I am excited to see how they play and compete with him because he's not going to let up. He is going to complain. He is going to yell. He's going to cuss. He's going to bring an edge I think we've lost. And I'm ready to see that edge back on the basketball court.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because it feels like whenever if we're saying that there wasn't enough edge, I mean, for us, like, we're pretty vulgar guys in terms of the language that we use during games. We get animated. We like to throw out F words and stuff like that. We get fired up, man. Like that's just how we are. And I think that's kind of how Michael Malone is. Like no nonsense is basically the way to put it. There are guys that do it the way that Hubert Davis does and they have success. We talked about, I think we mentioned it on this podcast a few times, but we've talked about it a lot to other people when we talk about Hubert Davis. Just about anywhere else, what Hubert Davis did at any average power conference job would be good enough. He would be succeeding. They would look at him as a success. And that way of coaching would be pretty successful. But for Carolina, I think, part of it is we were just so used to the way that Roy coached. Dean was very hard on his players as well. But, Yeah, Roy. I mean, Roy wasn't a guy that was always cursing. I mean, it wasn't every other word that came out of his mouth. It's not that. But when he needed to get fired up, there would be curse words that would be dropped. He would let people know how he was feeling. And I feel like you get that feel with Michael Malone and any sports fan. Maybe there are some sports fans out there that don't get inspired by coaches like that don't like to see coaches that are fiery and yell at their players. I'm not talking about like Trent Dilfer level where it's like just you're clearly a douche. Like, I don't get that feel from Michael Malone. I get the feeling of a guy that's going to be very well respected. And when he does get angry in certain moments and fired up, guys are going to know, okay, he's fired up for a reason. We need to adjust the way that we're playing. I think it's going to be more motivational, not trying to tear guys down. And I think that's the thing that you really are looking for from Michael Malone. I think you get that. I know there are people that said in Denver that, you know, there are conflicting reports as to whether or not the locker room really liked him at the end. I have no idea. The only way to find out is to actually see this thing play out. But from a fan standpoint and from a guy who has had coaches like that before at Carolina, has had coaches like that coach my other teams that I follow in sports, I love those types of coaches, managers. Those are my favorite because the thing that you always know, and I don't think I ever got to this point with Hubert. You know, on the football side of things, I'm there with Belichick. I've asked, does he care? I never want to be at that point for Carolina basketball. And I'm not saying that's the way that I felt with Hubert Davis, but I talked about it earlier. The one thing that I wonder is how much confidence did Hubert Davis have when he took over the job? And I wonder if he ever really felt like he gained that confidence. Maybe he did after that first year, but the confidence never really showed when you saw him in certain moments later on in his tenure. It felt like there were some times where you were like, yeah, I don't know if Hubert feels confident in himself here to make the right decisions. And with Michael Malone, I don't think you're ever going to feel like that. I think you're going to feel pretty justified in the fact that he's confident in himself and he's going to make those right decisions. And, you know, the thing is yeah, I'm with you. Doubt we're ever going to come on here and question the effort level of guys out there. And if you do, if you question the effort level of a player, it's going to be, we question the effort level of said player. He was taken out of the game and we didn't see him the rest of the night. Because if you don't play with 100% effort, the way this roster is built, I don't know how many guys are on this roster that you can't play. Like, to me, like, yeah, I think he's ever going to go and say, hey, the backcourt's really struggling. We're throwing Evan Smith out there and he's playing extensive minutes in this. We're going to play him the rest of the game. Probably not. No offense to Evan Smith, but he's an end of the roster guy. Outside of him, in terms of the guys that are on scholarship, John Holbrook is in that weird because he was here beforehand, so he's still considered like a holdover walk-on or whatever they classify it as. Outside of those two, I could see him playing anybody extensive minutes if other guys aren't performing. He's not going to lay back and just say, yeah, we're just going to accept this is the group we have. This is what we got to deal with. Nope. I don't see him being that type of guy. So I think it's going to be really interesting to monitor. I'm excited for Michael Malone. But I'm not making, the thing is, I'm excited, but I'm not making any guarantees when it comes to this team. I'm just not there yet. But I do think that hearing from him, he sounds like what I want to hear from my head coach. He's saying everything right. Now we just got to see what the results look like on the court.
That'll wrap it up for this edition of the Four Corners podcast. In the meantime, guys, we would direct you guys to the website. That's heeltoughblog.com. We had you covered over the weekend with the Sayon Keita news. Any other news and notes around Carolina basketball, we will have you covered on that front. We're also getting you ready for the start of football season. Starting quarterback decision came down today. That article on the website, heeltoughblog.com. And before you know it, we'll have the TCU preview for the first game of 2026 on the website. All that great coverage, heeltoughblog.com. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Anywhere you find your podcast, just search the Four Corners Podcast, and we'll pop up there. We strongly encourage you guys, rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any audio editions of the show. If you're a video consumer of the pod, the best way to keep in touch with us is like and follow the Facebook page at Heel Tough Blog. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Heel Tough Blog, or follow us both on Twitter at HTB_Josh for me, at HTB Anthony for him. The second that we go live, any of those three sites will send you a notification. You can hop right in, be a part of the conversation as we sit here and talk Carolina basketball. But that'll wrap it up for this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for both watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.